You are listening to X-Wing Radio.
Welcome back, my new Sith apprentice. I'm David, that's Wesley, and you just tuned in to X-Wing Radio, your bi-weekly podcast from a galaxy far, far away.
David, I'm a little thrown off because it's not 12 o'clock at night.
No,
We're
it's
actually doing
9
this in
o'clock
the
in the morning.
morning. We're actually doing this in the morning. I'm not a morning person. You are, but I'm not a morning person. Despite
Yeah, so,
having worked many jobs that I have to go in at like 5, I'm not a morning person.
so, a little bit of behind the scenes here, I guess. Wesley and I were just talking about this. Um, so apparently, he literally, like, rolled out of bed and then just hopped on the call. Um, and I've been up since, like, technically, okay, I don't know if I had any sleep between then and now. I was trying, but I know for a fact that I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning. So it's
What time did you go to bed last night?
9.
Okay. See, I went to bed about 1. So you woke up not too long after I went to sleep.
Yeah,
Although
I, I,
technically I
I
guess I
think I
might have been
probably
in bed
got.
about 12, but anyways.
I think I probably got a couple extra, like maybe an hour or two of sleep after that. But I've been like up and about since like 6:30 or 7.
Yeah. I'm I'm much better at staying up late than I am at getting up early, but
Mm.
out of
Which
necessity, I learned how to do
mm,
everything. So
which is also kind of funny because normally when we record, it's the inverse. It's we record late at night, and then I pretty much immediately go to bed.
yep,
And then you're probably up for 2 or 3 hours afterwards.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
Definitely a different dynamic here. But David, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about our sleep schedules. We're not a uh
No, we're here to talk
health
about whether or
health
not Jedi
health.
actually sleep.
We're not a health and wellness channel because we would be the wrong people for that.
Take our
We are
advice. We are professionals.
something like
For,
that.
for, for, for legal reasons, disregard this thing.
Disregard anything that we say. We are not legally liable for anything stupid that you do, only for the stupid things that we do. David, we're talking about the last book in the Darth Bane trilogy, Dynasty of Evil. Overarching thoughts and opinions.
Um, Darth Bane is
Good,
the
you don't
bad guy.
have any. I did think it was interesting in this book, actually, like to be serious and talk about the book for a second. I did find it interesting in this book how like you start to see like okay, you see it some in the last book, but you start to see in this book because of how it ends. It's kind of throughout the book switching perspectives to where you're not necessarily just following Bane as the main character. Xana starts to become a prominent main character in this book too.
Mm,
Like it kind of shifts you because obviously with the rule of two, they're shifting you to have her take over essentially.
mm. Yeah, that's definitely and I think I mentioned that last time, and I think you made the comment that it's very. I think I initially made the comment that it's very similar to the Darth Plagueis novel, and you said it's kind of like if they split the three parts of the Plagueis novel into three books, which it
Mhm.
very much so is. Um, but like the Plagueis novel did the same thing. It starts off following the master and then switches focus to the apprentice because the apprentice becomes the master.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Um but it is interesting and you also mentioned how like in this Darth Bane is the bad guy. You kind of jokingly mentioned that just a minute ago,
mm,
but like he kind of is in a sense,
well,
despite like still being basically the main character for most of the book. But like he is,
so
you
that's
know,
that is the thing about these books, which Drew Karpyshyn honestly did a really good job with that. So
mhm,
obviously, like we mentioned in the first when we talked about Path of Destruction. Bane is not the good guy. He's the protagonist, but there really is no good guy in this book, in these books. Um, even uh, the character of Sarah, which we'll get to later, you kind of think, oh, she might be actually like a quote unquote good guy, but no, we find out that not really. Um,
Yeah, everyone has some ill intentions
yeah,
in these books.
mm.
The
and
dark
it
side of the force surrounds these books, and so everyone in it is somewhat evil.
yeah, even a lot of the and again, it's probably just the way that because it's portrayed from the Sith's point of view, so it's the kind of the Sith's opinion of the Jedi. But the
Mhm.
Jedi are all very arrogant and very cocky in a lot of the way they
Which
portray themselves.
which isn't even that far from what we see in normal Star Wars anyways,
Mm,
because the Jedi are very arrogant, very cocky, and that's honestly why it's so easy for the Sith to undermine them.
mm. Like I said, I think a little bit of it is just the way the book is written because it's written from the point of view of the Sith, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like a bit more of an extreme.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean it's taking these qualities and magnifying them. But
Yeah,
they're still there.
not to jump too far ahead, but there's a point in the story where, as you mentioned, the character of Sarah goes off and talks to the Jedi, and in that encounter there, I think it's probably one of the few times that we actually get to see the Jedi in this book. But the Jedi come across as very arrogant and very like haughty and stuff like that, and it's like, you know, you're this person isn't really a fan of the Jedi per se. She probably would lean closer to the light side than the dark side, but she's still not like a Jedi. She still sees the flaws within the Jedi. Half of the exchange between her and the Jedi was predicted ahead of time because of how she knows the Jedi are. I guess that's the end of the sentence. How the Jedi are. But
Mm,
you know, it but it really shows. I mean, there's only one Jedi. I think only one or two Jedi that she interacts with, but you could definitely see, even at this point in time, about 1,000 years before, it's about 980 something BBY. I think is it is at this point in time, and you know, you can already see the Jedi are just on that path to where they're just enough arrogant enough and think that they're in a good enough spot by the time the Clone Wars roll around
mm.
and by the time Revenge of the Sith rolls around, that the Emperor is just it's very easy for him to take over. You know.
So, well, one thing I want to you just kind of made me think of, and this doesn't really have much to do with the actual books themselves, but so in the Phantom Menace, uh, Caddy Mundi is the one that makes the comment, the Sith have been extinct for a millennia,
Hmm.
and in these books, we're kind of led to believe that that was um what the Jedi are thinking of was in the last book when um the Jedi go and find Xana's cousin and kill him, thinking he's a Sith.
Yeah.
You're kind of led to believe that that's kind of what they're thinking of, 1,000 years
Hmm.
before uh um the Phantom Menace. But if that's the case, then why would Yoda immediately jump to the conclusion that the rule of two is still a thing?
Yeah, and see that's one thing that I did have a thought on was why how do the Jedi know the rule of two if yeah, there's supposed to be a straggler of the Sith who is alive and they kill
Mm-hmm.
him, as opposed to Bane reinstating the rule of two and then them killing him, you know?
Because, like, in all
I
reality,
actually
they're probably more thinking of if we're looking at these books as canon, they're probably more thinking of the thought bomb as when the Sith went extinct. Because
yeah.
when they killed why can't I not think of his name? When they killed Xana's cousin, it's like that like you said, they assumed it was a straggler.
Yeah. Well, my thought with this too is so I had heard, I think I stumbled across some kind of a podcast, and it was one guy who like essentially would go through and retell the stories from like different novels or whatever. And he told the Bane novels. And obviously he like condensed them greatly or whatever. And probably had issues like with copyright, so he had to condense them or whatever. But he retold the stories. And from what he told, that's the knowledge of these books I had before I read them. It sounded like Bane had one or two confrontations with the Jedi after the thought bomb, and somehow along those lines is how they found out that there's supposed to only be two Sith now. That's the rule of two, and then they end up quote unquote thinking that they killed him, and then he goes into hiding. That was the thought that I had beforehand. Bane doesn't even come in contact with the Jedi. I don't even know if he comes in contact. Has he come in contact at all with the Jedi this whole entire book? But even if that's the case, um, he doesn't come in
See,
contact with them
what
after the thought bomb.
what would have made more sense is if in Rule of Two, the second book, if Bane had fought Farfalla like earlier in the book, and then Farfalla reported back to the Jedi on basically on the Rule of Two
Yeah.
and this mysterious Darth Bane, and then gone and confronted him again, gotten killed, and
Yeah,
then and
and then
then
the description of how he looks, they could still thought that they killed it.
yeah.
Um, okay, so just briefly looking up how does Yoda know about the rule of two? This this pop-up thing does not make any sense either. In the Star Wars: The Clone Wars season 6 episode Sacrifice, Yoda travels to Morban and speaks to the spirit of Darth Bane, who created the rule of two. Yoda's knowledge of the Sith doctrine likely comes from extensive Jedi records and historical accounts. But at this point in time, Yoda, there shouldn't be anything historical going back to Bane. You know, honestly, Yoda shouldn't even know anything about Bane either, because while he was kind of a prominent Sith Lord within the Brotherhood of Darkness, he wasn't one for a long enough period of time that the Jedi would have had him as a target, because you know within the Brotherhood of Darkness, they knew who Darth Bane was because he had rose to power, and they're like, oh, I know who this is. But because he hadn't been much on the battlefield, the Sith weren't the Jedi weren't aware of who he was as much. So
Mm,
honestly, without the rule of two and the Sith being known, Darth Bane shouldn't even be a someone that the Jedi recognize,
mm.
per what we're reading in these books.
I would just say that honestly, another thing that Drew Karpyshyn could have done to kind of reconcile that, because he's writing this leading, or, with the prequels in mind, because he like
Yeah,
when were these written? These were uh late 2000s, I think, 2009. So yeah, he's writing these with the prequels in mind. So honestly, probably well prequels in mind, but not necessarily Clone Wars.
yeah,
So season 6 of the Clone Wars came out after these books came out. So, but the Jedi still should have learned about the rule of two in these books.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm looking at uh I don't know what this. I think it's like supposed to be some Q&A like type page or whatever, but someone asked the question of how Yoda knows, and one of the responses is everything Yoda knows. Does he not? And it's like, okay, fair enough, but yeah, what's the actual reasoning for it? That is one thing that I have thought of before though, because of what, like, even before we read the books, I think even back when we were watching the movies, that line came up, and I was thinking in my head, I was like, from what I know of the books, I was like, why? How is he able to know what the rule of two is? I think I had a way to justify it, but now having actually read the books, it's like, okay, there's no point in these books that the Jedi would have learned of the rule of two. Like the Jedi are kind of a prominent quote unquote character in the first book, but after that, they've really been like just they're part of they're part of the world that's been built in this story, but they're not really a prominent character for most of it.
Mhm. Mostly like,
Um,
General Hoth is kind of a prominent character in the first book, and then Farfalla is kind of a prominent character in the second book, but in the third book there really are not, like, other than when Sarah goes to Coruscant, there really are no Jedi in this
yeah.
book. Anyway,
Um,
we should probably go ahead.
I was gonna say something, but since we're gonna dive into the book here, I do want to make the comment that we didn't stop at the beginning of this and talk about any Star Wars upcoming news or things going on. But I took a look. There's not a whole lot of new stuff. We've already talked about Andor. We've already talked about the 20th, 5th, 20th, yeah, 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. So we're pretty much all up to date. So we can just hop right into this book
I'm
and
I'm scrolling through my news feed right now, and everything is either Lord of the Rings or Invincible. So, oh,
yeah,
there's a Star Wars, but again, it's talking about Andor. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
we'll any Andor news that we haven't talked about that is semi important, we'll dive into once the show starts coming out, and we'll be talking about it then.
Yeah.
So, all right, David, what what's this book about?
The Dynasty of Evil,
What's the Dynasty of Evil?
the Rule of Two.
Uh, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the rule of two and Yoda knowing about it. Honestly, if Yoda knew the way that he says it in the Phantom Menace makes it sound like because all the Jedi know in these books, right, is that the Sith are an order. Like they're basically a mirror image of the Jedi. They're supposed to rule in numbers, right?
Mm,
And that's all that they know. And but the way that Yoda talks about it is as if it's been established over years and hundreds or thousands of years that it's the rule of two Sith, you know, and then they just were able to quote unquote destroy the last of them. That's the way it comes across in the movies, but in the book, like we've been saying, that there's nothing in it that leads us to believe that that would have been the case.
mm.
That is an interesting thing. Star Wars is full of plot holes, and obviously this isn't even canon technically, but um, it
But
is
I
an
mean,
interesting
it's
thing.
written. Okay, so like the Tron trilogy, you know,
Hmm.
I give a lot of that stuff a pass just knowing when it was written.
Yeah,
It was written before we knew what the Clone Wars were.
yeah,
When it was written, like all we had were the original trilogy, the holiday special, and the Ewok movies. Like, there's not a whole lot to go off of there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like these books were written after Revenge of the Sith, so
Hmm.
there should be a little bit more lore wise after Revenge of the Sith and after the start of the Clone Wars, like the TV
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
So,
So and the thing is too is like these are great books,
mm,
but there are certain things that's like, man, you maybe could have done this or that. But yeah, Drew Karpyshyn does a great job in these books of telling the story, and let's go ahead and dive into that.
mm.
So what's the Dynasty of Evil, David? What is going on here?
Well, so there's kind of three main plot points in this book. Three main like plots. Obviously they all kind of intersect at points, and then they all kind of converge back at the very end
Kind of
of the book.
similar to what we have in like the Thrawn trilogy, where we're following the three different main areas of the story, but they
Yeah.
all kind of converge at the end. And that's one thing that's interesting about this book is this one is stylized in that way, whereas the other two, the first book really was one main storyline up until like nearing the end of the book. The
Mm-hmm.
second one was two main storylines. And then here in the third one, we're getting three main storylines going through the book.
Mm-hmm. So our main plot is kind of follows. Well, obviously this is the Bane trilogy, so our main plot follows Bane.
hmm
So this is set 10 years after Rule of Two, and 20 years after Path of Destruction. So there's a
hmm
10-year age gap, or 10-year gap between each book.
hmm
So
So Bane
think about
has been ruling the Sith for 20 years.
yeah. Now think about it. That's really not a long time. Like Bane
No.
or when Dez became Darth Bane, he was only about 20 years old. So he's only like in his 40s. So you know, he's still probably got like what another 40 years left in him of being a Sith Lord. I mean, what Dooku was 80, so
Yeah, but you also gotta look at the fact that like, okay, when Dooku became a Sith. Now, you can make the comment about how you know, Palpatine was well actually technically, despite the fact that Palpatine quote unquote ruled the Sith for what would have been? Let's see. He killed Plagueis in the Phantom Menace. So then there's about a 20-ish gap. So about 40 years. No, a little over 40 years was how long Palpatine ruled the Sith. So double the time that um happened here. Um I mean think about how long Plagueis ruled the Sith. We see all his time in the Plagueis novel. And
hmm
honestly, it's probably only the span of like probably no more than 20 years, maybe
hmm
closer to like 15, despite the fact that he had been a Sith for a long period of time and had an advanced
right,
age. He hadn't
yeah,
ruled the Sith for a long period of time. So I mean, it is a thing with the Sith is like, you know, it you're gonna die young, you're gonna die a violent death, you're going to eventually get overthrown.
hmm But here's the thing about Bane, because Palpatine was like 75 or 70 when Anakin threw him down the exhaust shaft, yeah,
hmm
in the Death Star. Um, Plagueis again was a Muon, but he was probably like he was over 100, but again he's a Muon, so pretty
Yeah.
average age, or probably about the equivalent of a human being in his 60s or 70s. But Bane's 40 here.
Yeah.
But
Well,
another thing you have to understand is the dark side is very hard, like physically, on its users.
hmm well, another thing too with that is while Bane no longer has the Orbalisks on him, they took a huge toll on his body too.
Yeah.
Also, you got to think about the fact that at this point in time, both books we've seen Bane have a near death experience. In the
Mm,
first one, he almost died from the poisons. In this one, or sorry, in the last one, in the first one, Path to Destruction, he almost dies from the poison. In the second one, he almost dies because of the Orbalisks dying on him when he releases his own Force Lightning.
mm,
And then they got removed. So he's been pretty down before
mm,
and had to come back from that. And specifically with the Orbalisks, that probably really took a toll on his body. So despite the
mm,
fact that he's only in his 40s, I mean, the signs of age have probably really started
yeah.
to sink in on him.
So basically, the point is that we're getting at here is Bane, despite only being in his 40s, is growing very weak
Yeah.
compared to where he
Now
once
let's
was.
I say let's preference that by saying that Bane is by no means weak. Like he is weaker. He is no longer
Mm,
at his peak, but he is like they mentioned how he's like a fraction slower, you know, with his moves when he's like
mm,
training with the Jedi or training with the lightsaber, with his forms, he's just a fraction slower,
mm,
which we find out later on because of how this book goes, and there's no spoilers here. Um, obviously him and Xana have a fight, and in it, I mean, Xana is still no match for him with a lightsaber, but he is no longer at his peak with all
mm.
this. So
But the
his worry with it is that Xana is waiting too long, and that as he
mm,
grows weaker, eventually she's just going to take over the title of Dark Lord by default, which is not how the rule of two is supposed to be.
mm, but also more one thing that's a little bit more troublesome to Darth Bane is the fact that he started developing a tremor in his left hand.
Hmm. Yes.
So like his left hand is shaky.
Yeah.
Obviously y'all know what a tremor is. But
It's an earthquake.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, he can shake the earth with his left hand.
he probably can.
Yeah. Anyway,
um,
but so that's kind of Bane's jumping off point in this book.
yeah,
Now,
the catalyst for everything.
yeah. Now, Wesley, okay. I want you to take a thought experiment here, okay? So put yourself in Darth Bane's shoes here, okay? I know they're probably bigger than yours, and you got big feet,
Dang,
but
I was gonna say, dang, these things are big.
yeah, but Bane's 2 meters tall. That's like 6'6". Like,
Yeah,
he's a big dude, so he's probably got big feet.
he's probably
Um,
got like probably like size 14 shoes or something.
yeah, yeah, big dude. Anyway, um, so put yourself in his shoes for a second here, and just imagine, picture this. You have an apprentice who you're worried isn't going to kill you.
Well, not only that, isn't going to uh to keep my ideology
Mm,
as part of the Sith.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
what would be your first thought to do to solve this problem?
I would want to because I'm at a point now in my life where I'm probably not too far away from death, or at least like if I do continue on living, it will be easier for Xana to strike me down. I would want to find a way to extend my life so that I can find a new apprentice and teach them the way of the Sith so that they can overthrow me at one point down the line. And consequently, that's exactly what Bane does too. So maybe he got the idea from me because it would not be the other way around. Um,
Hmm.
but
Now,
yeah,
how does one extend their life? I mean, at this
well,
point, they haven't heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, so.
see, the thing is there are many ways of extending your life. Brain is trying to figure out what that means. Okay,
Hmm.
because up until he finds what he's looking for and yada yada yada. He doesn't know what he even means by extending his life. um Now there is an ancient ritual. Uh it's a ritual of essence transfer.
Sounds
So that is
spooky.
something that he would like to look into because his body is failing him. So he would like to maybe even see about finding a new body, and he can continue this as long as possible. Continuing his life for
Mm.
however long
So,
he needs to.
let's talk a second here about um Bane and Xana's cover, where they're hiding out, because we found out in the last book that um that Xana and Bane were hiding out on what's the planet?
I don't remember. It wasn't Ambria. No, it was Ambria.
Ambria, yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's of course where Khalib was
Yeah, we were calling him Caleb last week, and then I started listening to the audiobook. I was like, "Oh, it's Khalib, not
yeah,
Caleb." How stupid of us.
yeah, where Khalib was the healer was. Um so yeah, they're hiding out in Ambria, and they're kind of in like a hovel almost, like
Yeah.
not very
Well,
extravagant. But
the reason they did that was because of the fact of the obelisks that Bane had. He couldn't really. I mean, he was already an imposing figure. It kind of, which I don't really understand necessarily why this would be such a big deal. Like in our universe, in our world here, if someone had something like that on them, they would obviously be like, "Oh, what's going on? What's wrong with you?" You
yeah,
know, it's like you like, okay, if someone comes in with like a bunch of tattoos, like all tatted over their face, you might think that maybe that they're a shady person, right? Like there's probably people in the world who would think when they see that this is a shady person. Um, and that's kind of the idea here, although I don't understand why him having the Orbalisk would be that big of a deal, being that they're in a galaxy far, far away with aliens of all kinds out there. But that's beside the point. Um, you know, it makes sense in our world, so we're just gonna adopt it over there. But he doesn't want to be a vaccine, really. Now the Orbalisks are gone, so he can go out and do his own stuff. They can live a little bit more in the light
mm,
and not risk being discovered.
yeah. So Bane and Xana actually have a mansion on Ciutric,
Hmm.
which is kind of a is it mid rim or outer rim? I think it's outer rim.
Uh, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Adoran.
It's outer rim, but it's kind of in the middle of a bunch of trade routes, so like they get a bunch of information and stuff from all over the place. But it's also kind of a hub for a bunch of like the galaxy's entrepreneurs to live because it's kind of away from the Republic, away from all these meddling governments, and
Yeah.
they can kind of just stay here and do business, which is what Bane and Xana are undercover as they're pretending to be a brother and sister entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're you know they've got a lot of wealth. They've got this big mansion on Ciudric. But Bane has a ton of contacts because there is still a large black market for Sith artifacts.
Hmm.
And so Bane has a lot of these contacts with throughout the black market because he portrays himself as a collector of these items because there are still a ton of collectors of Sith artifacts. Most people in the galaxy probably just because the Jedi want to confiscate all this stuff. It's probably just the taboo thing of, oh, these are banned. I want to collect this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's always people who want stuff along these lines,
Yeah,
even if they don't quite understand what they're collecting.
yeah. But despite that, Bane knows what he's collecting. Um,
Yes.
and so Bane goes to one of his contacts to learn about this, all of this stuff for well, prolonging his life. And
Well, the
this is where
reason that the what he tells his contact to look for is any book, manuscript, paper, page, anything that written down that has the mention of Darth and Dedu,
hmm
a Sith Lord who was well known. Well, a Sith Lord who apparently lived for like 1,000 years and um was able to prolong his life. And
hmm
so that's what he's on the search for is Andedu and Dedu's holocron.
hmm which that's also another point that we've got to mention is Bane has at this point successfully completed his own holocron.
Yes. So yeah, Bane has made his holocron, which do we see a Bane holocron at any point later? I know we see one of Reverend's.
I don't recall seeing a Bane hologram.
Okay, I think we just see him in the Clone Wars at that one point.
Mm.
But
Anyway,
yeah,
so he finally, from his contact, gets uh word of Darth and Dedu and is able to track him down to a planet in the core worlds,
deep core worlds.
deep core worlds.
Now
So,
the thing about the deep core worlds is so like last book they went to a planet called Tython, and that was another one in the deep core. Now the deep core worlds are their hyperspace lanes have collapsed, and because of the lack of necessity to get to these worlds, no one has charted new routes to these worlds. So it's a very long and dangerous journey because you have to take small jumps or, you know, more calculated jumps to get into the deep core. So it's going to take Bane a while to get back in.
mm, yeah, so he manages to, I don't remember if you have this planet's name written here in your notes.
Which one?
The planet that Darth and Dedu's on.
Oh, Prakith.
Kraketh, that's right.
Yeah.
So, um, so
I
Bane,
forgot that I hadn't mentioned it, and I was like, "What do you mean? It's sitting right there." But
okay,
I
yeah,
forgot that I
Bane
didn't mention it just now.
manages to find Praketh and finds out that there is basically a Sith cult on Praketh that is still worshipping Darth and Dedu, even though Darth and Dedu has been long dead.
Yeah, he's been
Um,
Edu.
yeah, he's been Dedu. But, um, despite it being a cult, a Sith cult, uh, Bane pretty easily just kind of like walks in and walks out. Even when they try to stop him, he pretty easily just,
Yeah, they make a comment every once in a while, or a couple comments in the book where it's like, without even breaking stride, he cut down, this priest or whatever, and oh, he grabbed this one and by the neck and or with the force and broke the neck, without
mm,
even breaking stride. He was
yeah,
very quickly in and out. Like I think last time when he went to, um, what was the name of the Sith Lord on Tython? And he
um,
goes there. He has like a whole entire like an. I think they made the point to let you know that it's like a hour long battle with like a bunch of mutant things. It's like that's not
mm,
the case here. Like he just goes in and goes out. Like it's a
yeah.
very
Even
little
in the Sith cult,
difficult.
there are like you said, like priests that are force sensitive.
Yeah,
Like,
most of them aren't, but there are some, but they're nothing compared to Bane.
they're probably power level wise on the level of like an Inquisitor, if that
Hmm.
much. Like,
Yeah,
so very
very
easily,
low
like,
level.
yeah, very easily, like, dealt with. Um, so Bane pretty much just waltzes in, uh, disturbs the remains of Darth and Dedu to steal the holocron, and then waltzes out, because he literally, like, so this temple is literally Darth and Dedu's tomb,
Yeah.
and the holocron is, like, Darth and Dedu's, remains are literally clutching the holocron.
Mhm.
So, like I said, he literally, like, goes grave robbing to find. I
Yeah.
mean,
Which
he.
so one thing that Bane finds out with his search for Darth and Dedu is that Darth and Dedu was purged from galactic records. The
Mm,
Jedi have tried to purge everything known of this guy. And Bane was able to stumble across a brief passage about him, but not saying anything about where he was when he lived or anything like that. Then his collector friend contact or whatever ends up getting him something that leads him to Prakith. But because this planet is in the deep core and the deep core hasn't been uh like no one goes to the deep core anymore and the Jedi have no reach to the deep core, unlike the tombs on Korriban, this tomb is completely touched.
Mm,
So while he found nothing in the tombs of Korriban, he goes here and, Darth and Dedu's mummified body is still there. The holocron is still there. Everything is still intact because the cultists have, kept it intact. And he's able to actually find what he's looking for pretty easily there.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
and
now, go ahead.
well, I was gonna move on. So what were you
Okay.
gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say was that with all this, so Bane going to Prakith is not normal for Bane. In the past 10 years since they've been on Cetric, Bane very rarely goes off world. If he has business, he usually has Xana go do it, or they come to him. So Bane doesn't want to arouse suspicion from Xana. So he has a mission for her to do. And
Mm-hmm.
this kind of leads us into our B plot
Mm-hmm.
of the story. So
Which
before Bane leaves, go
we'll
ahead.
get to that in a second. But after, just to kind of wrap up the Bane A plot before it kind of merges with one of the others. So while flying back to Ciutric from Prakith, because it takes a long time, like you said, because he's got to make a ton of like small jumps.
And
Um,
this will even probably take longer because the
yeah,
route that he took the last time has kind of collapsed itself too.
yeah. So Bane is trying to access the information of this holocron, and as we've seen before, the holocrons kind of have a basically like an avatar that the Sith who created it kind of put in place.
Yeah.
An avatar
The
of
gatekeeper.
themselves, a gatekeeper. Yes, that's what the book calls them. Um, but Bane, when he's talking to this gatekeeper and and Dedu's holocron, he's almost kind of just like, okay, I don't need to talk to you. Go away. Like
Yeah.
literally, he's just like, it's literally the Ron Swanson meme of I know more than you. Like, you
Yeah.
know. So
What's
Bane
interesting
instead of
what's
playing.
interesting is that Bane gets very frustrated with the
Mm,
gatekeeper here because of the fact that the gatekeeper doesn't believe that Bane's ready to
mhm,
know what he's looking for.
mhm,
But everything that Darth and Dedu has taught him are things that he's already tossed to the side because it's old teachings that he makes the comment that it's teachings that he was taught in the Sith Academy that he is
mhm,
not like he doesn't believe those. So he's already like discounted everything that Darth and Dedu says. All he wants from this is the ritual of essence transfer.
mhm. Yeah. So Darth and Darth Bane literally just uses the Force and mentally dives into the holocron to find the information he wants. He just bypasses the gatekeeper altogether.
Hmm.
Which
And this,
he obviously he knows kind of about holocron construction from building his own.
hmm
So he's able to do this now. Whereas like with the Revan holocron and then the other holocron we had found in Rule of Two, he had to kind of go through the proper channels to actually learn all the information.
yeah,
Um, but now he can just kind of it's basically like instead of basically like instead of playing a video game and leveling yourself up, you go into the source code and just change the value to give yourself a higher level. That's basically what Bane did.
yeah, and also like with this too, he essentially just downloads all the information from the holocron into his brain.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have to work on learning the ritual of essence transfer. He
hmm
just knows it now. Like once he goes in there and gets it, he knows it.
hmm Which is kind of a testament to how powerful he's become.
Yeah. Um. So yeah. So he now he knows how to do the ritual of essence transfer. And one thing, because we will come back to this point later, one thing important with essence transfer is it's a battle of the wills if you're going to be transferring your essence into someone else's body. You can transfer into a clone, but you have to go into someone who's suitable. So Bane has to go into someone who's suitable enough to contain his power. And um, if he goes into someone who's suitable, he might have to battle them with their will. Now, uh, when he tries it, he only gets one shot because his body will be destroyed.
Mhm.
So he's got one shot at it. So he's got to make it count. But that's an important part of it, and we can leave that there, that little thread dangling there, while we
Mhm.
go and talk about these other side
Yeah, because like I
plots.
said, at this point in the A plot, it merges with one of the other ones, so we'll come
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
that. Um,
So Bane never goes off world. Xana needs to have a distraction. What does Bane figure out for
so
her to do?
well, we should probably go back and talk about the prologue briefly, because we kind of skipped over that.
Well, it's mentioned here briefly.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so basically the gist of the prologue is on this planet of Doan, um, there was this rebel faction trying to basically overthrow the royal family. And in the process of all this, it's kind of getting ahead because it's something we find out later, but it's not really a spoiler. But in this whole kind of, rev with all these rebels, um, the prince of this royal family, the son of the king, ends up getting killed. Um, but the prologue focuses on this meeting of these rebels and a Jedi. And it's not really super important, but the Jedi's there because the rebels had found some Sith artifacts.
Hmm.
Basically, why the rebels there. But then an assassin ends up showing up and killing the rebels and the Jedi.
Yeah. So Bane learns about the death of this Jedi and is like, huh, something's up. This is not really the most important thing on that I want to know, but it's important enough. I'm gonna send Xana to go find out why the Jedi was there, what happened, yada yada yada.
Hmm.
And so
Now,
with this little plot right here, we kind of switch over to where we're seeing things more from Xana's point of view.
hmm,
And one thing to note with this is, so at the beginning of the book, Bane is really like, man, Xana's disappointed me. She hasn't challenged me, and now I have to find a new apprentice and figure out how to extend my life, yada yada yada. Then you come to Xana's part of the story, and you're like, and she's sitting here, and she's like, I haven't challenged him yet because I'm waiting for to do it on my terms.
hmm,
She's noticed this tremor in his hand. She thinks that it's a ploy, possibly by him, to get her to challenge him before she's ready. She knows that Bane is cunning and plans things out and is constantly scheming, and so she's not very trustworthy of the fact that this tremor is legitimate. And if it is, great. But if it's not, she could be walking into a trap. So she wants to challenge him on her own terms.
hmm. So we end up with this situation where Bane sends Xana to Doan to on kind of like, she kind of realizes it too that this isn't really like, the most important thing that she
Yeah.
could be doing with her time. And she even makes like you could kind of get when she's leaving for Doan, you kind of get this look into what she's thinking, and she pretty much has come to the conclusion that okay, this is the last mission I ever run for Bane.
She's gonna go find her own apprentice, and
Mm,
then she's going to go and challenge Darth Bane.
yeah. So this leads her to obviously to Doan to start with. Um,
Yeah.
so honestly, not much happens on Doan itself. It is because it is just kind of a nothing of a mission. There's not a whole lot that happens,
Hmm.
but there is something that piques her interest.
What is that?
Well, see, what do you have written here? So she hears about a dark Jedi.
What's the Dark Jedi?
Well, you see, it's not he's not quite a Jedi, but he's not quite a Sith either.
Hmm.
He kind of just like, he was a Jedi. He left the Order, but never really fully committed to the dark side the way the Sith do.
Okay. I'll accept that. I'll accept that.
Mm. So Xana decides to track this guy down because she thinks, hey, he might make a good apprentice.
So where does she track him down to? I do not have that here.
No, you don't have that here.
Oh well. Well,
No,
she
crap. What's the moon? Um, it's the
Andor.
moon that orbits Nahada.
Oh yeah.
Um, crap. It's a. Hang on.
Nashada.
Nashada. That's right.
Um but yeah, so he lives over here, the planet or whatever. She tracks him down to this planet, finds out his name is Seth Hearth, and essentially she intimidates him into becoming her apprentice. She kind of like she gives him the option, but his options are become my apprentice or die. So, when given the choice, most people are going to just, accept the offer and not die. And so that's what he does out of survival instinct. So once she does this, she then goes back to Cedric to finally challenge Bane.
Now, okay. But so is her plan to just like go back to their mansion and just like ambush Bane just like on a whim? Just
No, she's not going to ambush him. She's going to go there and confront him. And
oh, okay,
Seth
okay,
Earth
okay.
is not going to interfere whatsoever. He's not here for that. Now if Xana loses, I mean, Bane might kill him, but
Hmm.
we don't really know
Yeah.
what might happen.
Okay. So so I'm assuming that that's what happens is Xana ends up going back to their mansion and challenging Bane, and they fight, right?
Well, actually, we're not there yet.
Not there yet. What do you mean?
No. We're not there yet. See, this is the point in the story where Xana's plot converges with the other ones. But we got one more plot to catch up before we get to our conclusions in the end of the book, where they all kind of converge.
Right. You do have a C plot here. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. What? So
What's
that
this C plot about?
so let's lay the groundwork here. So we have Bane, and he's off to practice. We have um we have Xana, and she's off to Dome. Well, you told me a minute ago about this Jedi and this rebellion going on Dome. That's where Sarah comes in. It said
Okay.
Sarah, but it's spelled like Sierra or something. There's no I in it, I guess.
It's like
Anyways,
Sierra without the I. Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, but So who the heck is Sarah? Well, Sarah is the princess. She was married to the prince. Okay, what does that matter? It doesn't really, besides the fact, well, actually, that does matter a lot. But the reason she's an important character is because of how she connects to the rest of the story. David, do you remember a couple years back, about 20 years back, when Darth Bane is dying from the poison? You remember how he is able to get the healer who can feel no pain or is not frightened by pain and has no way really of Bane has no way of controlling this guy. You remember how he gets him um to fold and actually heal
Kills
him?
him.
What?
No,
You're useless.
that look of confusion you just gave me.
Well, because I wasn't sure, like, if your audio caught everything, and I was like, "Did I hear it? What did he say?" Because it sounded like it cut in and out, and I was like, "What?" And then I was like, "Did he just say kills him?"
Anyway, but no, Bane threatens his daughter.
His daughter. So what ends up happening after that exchange there is Khalib sends his daughter away around when she's 16. He sends her away and says, "Hey, one day Bane will come back, and I don't want you here to be a you know to be threatened by him. I want you to be gone." He said, "Don't remember anything about this life. Don't come back. Just go and live a new life." And so that's what she does. She goes around the galaxy because she's a healer as well as like her father. She goes around the galaxy and she's doing healing and all this stuff. And one day she stumbles across this planet and she ends up healing this prince. Well, the prince becomes infatuated with her and says, "I love you," and they get married. And then a couple months later, he dies. Um, so she got the best of both worlds. But anyways, so
Explain. Actually, don't. Actually, don't. I don't want
anyways,
to know.
um, anyways, so yeah, but so that's kind of where we pick up with Sarah. She's a widower. She's a widow, and she is grieving over her husband's death. Now, what we find out too here is that so Sarah has a bodyguard, um, Lucia, and she just so happened to hire an assassin to go and kill the miners who killed her husband, killed her her master? I don't know. Her friend's her
Sarah's
friends
husband.
who killed Sarah's husband. I was just trying to figure out what the adjectives would be. But anyways, so yeah, she hired the bodyguard that we were talking about earlier who killed the Jedi and who killed the miners because of the grief that Sarah was in. Now, the king is very upset about all this. He doesn't know what happened, but the Jedi think that he hired the assassin. So this is the exchange that we
Now,
were talking about earlier,
why would they think that?
so that they could find where the miners were at. They think that he let the Jedi come in, and he hired the assassin to follow the Jedi to kill the miners, and the Jedi just got was kind of collateral damage. That's what they believe, but they don't really have any evidence to the point. But what happens is Sarah says, "Hey, let me go talk to the Jedi. I'm going to convince them that you had
Now,
nothing to do with any of this."
okay. Before we go to that, Lucia. Why does that name sound familiar?
Oh, it doesn't. Anyways, so did they mention her name earlier? I didn't
I
realize they
think
mentioned it.
I think the
I
name
thought
is
they
mentioned
just
in
I thought they would have been Path of
Path of
Destruction.
Destruction.
Because it had been a while, I guess I didn't think about it. I had thought that because they do link it to a character, but I had thought that it was a nameless character that they now named. Anyways, so a little backstory on this character of Lucia. She was part of the Sith army. Okay, so
Hmm.
nothing really new there. I mean, a lot of people joined the Sith armies. They weren't bad. They just didn't like the Republic. And so she joined the Sith army, and she got into this pretty elite squadron called, what was it called? Like the Gloom Walkers. That's what it was. Um pretty elite little program there. Probably never heard of it. But that's what she, and I think she was a sniper in this little regiment. Now what's that look on your face for?
You know, seem to remember something about a sergeant in the Gloomwalkers. Some guy named Dez. Probably unimportant.
Oh, yes, Dez, the guy who punched his superior officer and then got court-martialed.
Right, right. And then the Sith Lords took him back to probably be executed. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what's known on Lucia's end. And because of that, not too long after that event, the lieutenant got shot in the back. Killed in action, you know. It just so happened that it might have been a stray bullet or two from one of the Gloomwalkers.
I mean, honestly, who would do that? I mean, such a nice
Lucia.
guy.
You stupid.
Just your delivery of that was just.
Anyways, yeah, but Lucia was a Gloomwalker and she knows Dez. She doesn't know what Dez became, but she'll find out soon enough.
Dez became
So
dead, didn't he?
Dez became dead. um, anyways, Sarah goes to the Jedi, not wanting to reveal to anyone that Lucia killed, or not killed, hired the assassin. But she goes to the Jedi and convinces them that the king had no knowledge, no part, no nothing in the matter that had to do with the death of the Jedi. Now that being said, while she's there, she learns a little tidbit that kind of throws her off a little bit. So, Pops over here, as a
Khalid.
father, it's one's duty to always be right. You'll learn this one day, David. It's one's duty to always be right. Now, you can't always flaunt it, okay? Because, you have the misses. But, yeah, you have to, you always, it's just a burden that you bear as a father, always being right. Khalid was also always right, because he was a father. And Bane did return to the camp. And from Sarah's knowledge, as of what the Jedi know, Bane killed her father. Very brutally. But luckily, he died too. So the Jedi have taken her revenge away from taken her revenge away from her. But at least the man who has haunted her dreams, because he's haunted her dreams, is dead.
Well, at least there's that. So, the story can go on, and they can go back to Doan and call it a day, right?
Yep. Very short book.
Yep.
Doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. It's weird that it didn't really have a conclusion here.
Um. So essentially, the Jedi that Sarah's talking to was one of the ones that was on Ambria when they quote unquote killed the last of the Sith. He gives her a description of what the man looked like. So, earlier we were talking about how big Bane's shoes are. So he's a pretty scrawny guy, I'm pretty sure. Not too big, kind of slimmer, with black hair, I believe. Um, yeah, I think that pretty well sums up, how big.
And a a limp arm,
Yeah, limp arm.
yeah,
Um, and I think that pretty well sums up what Bane looks like, right? Not
yeah,
some
pretty.
massive, not some massive dude who's like towering over everyone and also is bald. Sarah hears this description of Bane of the last Sith and automatically knows that Bane is still alive, and now she wants her revenge for Bane killing her father. So she gets Lucia to go back and hire the assassin, and um, she wants her to hunt down this assassin to hunt down Bane. Now, one interesting thing about this assassin is the assassin is an Itachi.
What?
What's it's not a Tamagotchi.
Assassin's a Tamagotchi.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta feed her once a day. I don't know. I don't know how you. I didn't have a Tamagotchi. I just know of them.
We-
What's that?
I feel like we were like, probably about 10 years too late, honestly.
Probably,
'Cause
probably,
that was
David.
a 90s thing, but yeah,
We're about 10 years too late on everything, David.
yeah.
Anyways, so what is it? It's do you remember how it's pronounced?
Tachi.
Itachi. So it's a
I think you
okay.
had it right
This
for
is
the first time, man.
Yeah. Well, I have it spelled right. I remember looking it back and forth. I just don't know how to pronounce it. Anyways, yeah. So she's a Tamagotchi female. Okay. And her name is the Huntress. Why does she call herself the Huntress, David?
Because she likes to hunt.
That's on me. That's on me, David. I set you up for stupid. I can get mad
You
at
know,
you for being stupid,
yeah.
but I can't get mad at you.
I think this just kind of goes to show, no matter when we record, we're always just gonna be delirious.
David, I'm half asleep half the time. So, anyways, so she calls herself the Huntress because Tamagotchis have this rare ability that they're force sensitive. Anyways, they also are
Um,
known to most Tamagotchis are force sensitive. David, I know exactly what I'm saying. Most Tamagotchis are force sensitive. Okay, so if you mistreat your Tamagotchi, you might die from force choking or lightning. Or
do I need to like call someone? Are you having a stroke? That honestly, that you need to make that a clip right there. Make that a reel.
um, but anyway, so yeah, Tamagotchis are force sensitive, and sometimes they are known to like see the future. So what happens with this one Tamagotchi is she became an assassin, a hired gun or whatever to because she can sense like she can if you tell her if she goes to a planet she can like feel out. So essentially what happens is Sarah hires her. She comes to the camp on Dome, Khalib's camp. She goes to the camp there, and she senses the area, and she learns all about the past, the world's past, everything, and then she sees Bane. She has visions of all the past here, and she sees Bane, and then now she starts to be attuned with Bane. So she says over the next couple weeks or days, I'm gonna have dreams about the planet he lives on. I'll see how many suns are in his sky, what color the moons are, and like all these different things. She's going to start seeing things, and eventually she will be able to narrow down where Bane is, despite the fact that Sarah doesn't even know his name, who he is, anything about him. She just knows what he looks like. So what happens though is, you know, while the assassin here is really good, she's no match for a Sith Lord, and she knows that. So Sarah gives her this quote unquote poison. It's not really a poison, but it's called Synflax, and it's supposed to incapacitate Bane. So what it does is it kind of calms the person down to the point where they can only really answer basic questions. And so as long as they get him with this poison and then administer it to him constantly to keep him sedated, she'll be fine. Now it's important to note here that Sarah isn't hiring the assassin to kill anyone. She's hiring the assassin to capture Bane. It's an important detail. What are you
So
smiling about?
basically, the plan is to get Bane high on space weed and then um capture him.
How do you get to space weed?
I don't know.
You
Said
got
it
some
con-
space. You got some space between your ears, and I believe some weeds growing up in there. Not smoking weed, but like because there's nothing good growing in your brain. It's just a bunch of weeds.
no.
Yeah, it's not funny
I
if I
mean,
explain
honestly,
it.
the other kind of weed is selling for like $3 million an acre. So I mean, that would.
You ain't got. Well, maybe you do have that much space. Go sell that stuff. You might get something. You can bat a. You can sell a bag of caprese salad.
There you go. I'm growing.
Did it take
Okay.
you a minute? Did it take you a minute to see what I was referencing?
I'm gross. Let's just move on.
Alrighty. So, David, all of our stories are gonna start converging on each other now. So, what happens is when Bane gets back from his trip, the Huntress is already waiting for him with a bunch of hired guns, like 20 or 40 hired guns, and she's waiting at his mansion for him, and he's completely unaware of what's going on. So that makes it still pretty hard to capture him. But the Huntress is successful because all she has to do is she has these little blades, and the poison is on the blades. All she has to do is just get one little nick in, and she's
Stab
good.
him.
Sure.
So what ends up happening?
She captures him. I mean,
Oh,
like half of her, the guns that she got hired are dead too, but that's not a concern for her. Um,
oh. So wait a
she
minute. Wait a minute.
she succeeded.
So if Bane's alone, is this? Does that mean that Xana and Seth ended up getting killed by Bane?
No. So Bane has just gotten back from his trip,
Okay.
and as soon as he gets back, he gets ambushed. Well,
Okay.
upon him getting back, not too long after that, Xana and Seth get back to Citra as well. Now, it's interesting because Xana's made some good contacts at the spaceport, and one of them tells her that, oh yeah, Bane got back just a day or so ago, and she's like, got back? Bane doesn't go anywhere. So now she's like, something's wrong. Bane never leaves. I gotta find out what's going on. So we're gonna proceed with caution. She also hears about an apparent dropship that landed that um was not hmm. Right now I'm looking at my this is completely random, but I'm looking over here at my I don't think my audio for my video side of the video has been recording this whole time. So you're gonna have to use use our backup.
Oh,
uh
okay.
I'm turning it on now, so I don't know if it'll matter, but anyways. Um but anyway, so yeah, so they go to back to the mansion and find it's been like this been overturned a little bit, like this been destroyed a little bit.
Oh no.
But but there's very little trace of anything. Although Seth does find something. He finds a blue little emblem on the ground. And it is an emblem worn by the Doan Royal Guard.
I don't think that's a good thing, because that means they can trace them back to Dome.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's
Someone
what they
someone
do.
got sloppy.
Someone got sloppy. Now, before they go to Doan, Xana has Seth learn everything he can about Doan. And Xana goes and tries to find out why Bane might have gone off world. What she ends up finding out is that Doan was interested in a Sith Lord called Endedu, and that's about it. That's all she can figure out. Although, so interesting fact about Seth, he used to be on an apprentice to someone on the Council of First Knowledge, which is a group in the Jedi Temple that goes after uh artifacts, Jedi and Sith artifacts, and tries to collect them. They try to collect the Sith ones for, to keep them out of the wrong hands, and then all that other stuff. But um, he knows who Darth Endedu is, and he knows about essence transfer. Not he doesn't know how to do it, but he knows of it. And so now Xana pieces it all together and is like, man, my master's betrayed me. He's trying to extend his life. Now I really got to kill him.
So it's
So
kind of an interesting thing here too, because at this point, Bane thinks Xana isn't going to uphold the rule of two and is going to just wait until Bane's old and decrepit to get rid of him. But
mhm,
then Xana is also like, oh, Bane is going against his own rule of two by trying to live forever.
yeah. Now, see, this is the point here. A little communication goes a long way. So if Xana just told him, "Hey, I'm gonna kill you soon," and Bane said, "Hey, that's good to know. I won't live forever," then this whole entire book would be resolved.
But if people, it is kind of an interesting thing in pretty much any like movie or show or anything, like especially sitcoms and soap operas.
Hmm.
If people just talked to each other, 99% of the problems wouldn't come up in these like all shows and
Yeah,
stuff. It,
yeah.
it's it's
Now
it's honestly kind of hilarious, but
it really is because sometimes 'cause I'm just like sitting here. I'm like, I'd never get in this situation because I would have, someone
okay,
would have told me, or I would have told someone, or whatever, and it's like,
it's like in like I Love Lucy.
hmm
Like most like there's so many episodes where like okay, Ricky works late one night and then Lucy thinks something's going on and so she goes on all this like hijinks to try to figure out what Ricky's actually up to when in all reality he just had like a business meal with some important executive or whatever, and
yeah.
it's like if you just like you know called home and
Now,
said hey
some of the communication isn't on purpose because he doesn't want Lucy to know about certain things, and that
True,
does,
but
sometimes
still,
play
it's
into
like,
it.
it's like,
Yeah, yeah. Now,
99% of the drama in that show wouldn't be an issue if they just actually talked to each other.
yeah. Now, the thing about this book here, though, is that one of them's got to die.
Yeah.
So, I guess communication can't always be the duct tape,
I mean,
flex tape,
if you look on the
whatever.
cover, they're literally fighting on the cover, so
Oh, they're kissing?
they're fighting.
No, they live there but a kiss.
Lightsabers between them.
That's gonna be a hot kiss.
Just move on. Stop talking. Anyway,
How am I supposed to move on if I'm not talking?
so Sarah ends up imprisoning Bane in what's called the Stone Prison. It was a ancient prison on Doan that the royal family controlled. Um, and basically it was like not a really humane prison. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of like the kind of place where like you get locked up in and you never see the light of day. And apparently the Senate came in and told them, hey, you can't do that.
yeah.
Um,
So it's been
so
shut down for a
yeah.
long time, but hasn't been like destroyed or anything
Mm,
or closed off or anything like that.
yeah.
So
So
that's where they
Sarah,
put
yeah,
Bane.
yeah. Um,
Hey, you
so
remember us talking earlier about how Lucia knows Bane or Dez?
yeah.
Well, she finds out that she knows who Darth Bane is now because she sees him and she immediately is taken back to 20 years prior when she was in the Gloomwalkers, and she sees the man that they all looked up to, who she thought was dead.
And then she realizes that Bane was right the entire time, and she becomes Bane's new apprentice.
Okay, so she is already against what Sarah's doing right now because she doesn't think that Sarah
Yeah. So
is
this is one thing that
herself.
this is one thing that I want to preface because I kind of hinted at this at the beginning. So through most of the book, you kind of like you're looking at Sarah's character, and you're like, oh, are we finally actually getting in these books actually getting a like good character? Like
Hmm.
good isn't like morally good, not good isn't well written because I think most characters in these books are well written, but like are we finally actually getting a like morally good character? Um, and then come to find out, not really, because yes, she might have
She's a
lived.
morally she's a morally good character that stumbles.
Yeah, because her whole motivation in this is being driven by um
Vengeance.
vengeance and ultimately hatred for
Yeah.
this man who effectively ruined her life. And so she, that's kind of consuming her at this point, and it draws gets to the point where she's literally using drugs to torture Darth Bane.
Yeah. Um yeah, and so, you know, this is not something Lucia likes to see out of her
Hmm.
friend. Lucia is her bodyguard, but they're friends. They've known each other for long enough that they're friends. But not only that, she also doesn't know if she thinks Dez deserves this fate. She said, maybe if Bane did kill Khalib, that he deserves the fate, but that she doesn't believe that he did. He said as much as that he didn't, and the huntress, who's still here at this point in time, has said she saw another woman there when
Mm.
um within the camp and everything, and so they believe, Lucia believes it's this other woman who killed Khalib,
Well,
and
because
that Bane is innocent.
Bane says as much. Bane says
Yeah,
it was Darzana, his apprentice, who killed Khalib.
yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like, Bane has nothing to hide. He doesn't care. So he has nothing to hide if he did kill him, but he says he didn't. So what ends up happening is Lucia ends up helping Bane escape. So what she ends up doing is the different sedatives that Sarah has been giving Bane to like keep him sedated, but then bring him, wake him up so that she can talk to him. She ends up giving him one of those that gets him like allows him to wake up, essentially, knowing that if Bane's awake, he can escape. So she doesn't quite like let him out, but she basically gives him the key, kind of a
Mm.
thing. And this ends up costing her her life. Now, this isn't till later on in the prison break, but Bane does remember her, but it doesn't really matter. You know, Bane wants revenge now against Sarah, and Lucia is going to stand in between Bane and Sarah, and so she ends up getting herself killed in this process.
Well,
But anyways,
Lucia still is kind of under the impression, or kind of hopes that, okay, this man has become a monster, but maybe Dez is still there somewhere.
yeah,
But,
which
as kind of we go through the story here, we find out that no, Darth Bane is not Darth Vader, who can, become Anakin again. Darth Bane is Palpatine. There's no redeeming him.
yeah, a completely irredeemable character, which something we talked about in
Yeah.
the last book, which was still carries over into this and is really good. So, anyways, Bane is seeking Sarah, but Xana is seeking Bane. They've tracked him down. They found the stone prison. She's here now, and she's tracking Bane. Now, Bane has just escaped from prison. He doesn't have any weapons on him. Xana has her lightsaber. This is not going to be a good fight for Bane. You would think.
I mean, I'm sure
Right?
Bane's powerful enough to actually, survive this. Like,
well, between Bane being able to prolong the fight and Sarah hitting the self-destruct button on the prison, Bane is able to escape. And in the process of escaping, before he escapes, he comes across the Huntress, who has his lightsaber, gives it back to him, and then swears loyalty to him and the Sith. And she also knows where Sarah's going to be, and so they go back to Ambria.
mm-hmm. So now before we follow Bane all the way to Ambria here, what happened to Seth? Because he was with Xana, and assumedly he followed Xana to Dune. So what happened with Seth?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is I didn't put much of that in there because I didn't know if it really mattered much or whatever. So Seth ends up going off and finding the holocron that was taken from Bane's house, the holocron of Andedu, and he ends up finding it. And long story short, he ends up escaping the prison, off in another ship. So he's kind of off on his own now. And we will get back to what's going on with his character later, because there are some important parts to it that I do want to talk about. But for the overarching part of the story, it's not too terribly important.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts that you have on him right now?
No, so we can kind of hop back to that. So basically, Sarah fled to Ambria. Bane followed her with his new apprentice, the Huntress, and then Xana follows Bane. So they're kind of
Well,
like they're kind of in a line here. So Sarah's gonna
Bane
get there first, Bane's gonna get there, and then Xana's gonna get there.
Bane sent out a signal to Xana to let her know that he was on
Yeah,
Ambria, so that they could go ahead and get this duel over with and not
yeah,
prolong it and be at war and divide the Sith essentially. Now,
yeah.
before that, though,
Because because at this point, Sarah has challenged Bane for the right to
Rule the Sith.
to rule the Sith, and Bane's already taken on a new apprentice, so we kind of have the problem that we had before with the Sith of
Mhm.
there's two, Sith lords challenging each other, and then so they've essentially split the Sith because Xana has already kind of assumed that role of Sith Lord.
Yeah, and now she has to actually like prove that she is one.
Yeah.
Now an interesting thing with this, not really interesting actually, but Bane wants to use Sarah as he, saw the value in her father and would see the value in using her, but she says she's not going to do anything to help him, and so he tells Huntress to kill Sarah. Um
Mhm.
Now at this point it's just Huntress and um Bane on Ambria here at the healer's camp, and Bane sends out a signal, a message to Xana, and says, "Hey, I'm here. Let's get this over with." So Xana gets there by herself, and the Huntress, who has renamed herself Darth Cognus, um, has vowed to swear has vowed to swear loyalty to whoever ends up winning the duel, but she's not going to interfere with any of it. Um, so then they fight. This is it. How's this fight go, David? I've been
Um.
talking a lot.
So I mean, obviously, they're both incredibly powerful at this point. So they fight.
But in different ways.
Yeah, they fight for a good while until Xana tries to pull a trick.
Well,
Now,
before
she
we get to
actually.
that, I do want to mention before we get to that, I do want to mention the something I mentioned earlier with this is in this, Xana still knows that she is no match for Bane in a lightsaber duel.
Mhm,
When he had the Orbalisks, he was so overpowering because he had nothing to lose. And now he's critiqued his fighting style to a point to where he's very she has learned a defensive um uh technique or whatever to where she's basically impenetrable. But Bane
Bane
is
has mastered all
extremely
7 lightsaber forms
and
at this
and
point.
he combines them in ways
Mhm,
that makes him very, very unpredictable. That's the word that I'm looking for.
mhm,
Unpredictable. So she knows that she's no match for him. But see, the thing is back on Doan, the reason she was unable to kill Bane, despite the fact that he didn't have a lightsaber, was because she was fighting him the way he wanted her to fight her.
mhm,
Here, she figures out that she needs to fight him the way she wants to fight him, using her strengths,
mhm.
not his.
So one thing I don't know if we've really touched on, but is mentioned several times throughout Rule of Two and Dynasty of Evil, is the fact that Xana is very skilled in Sith magic.
Mhm,
Um, Obviously Bane is more skilled in the traditional force powers of the like dark side force powers, like force lightning, and then your basic, using the force to control objects and stuff. But Xana is very skilled in Sith magic.
mhm,
So, and she actually pulls this trick on Seth earlier in the book, where she um, basically it's almost like Scarlet Witch in the Avengers,
mhm.
how she can kind
Yeah,
in like Age of Ultron, how she can kind of like put all these like visions and stuff of like people's worst fears in their mind.
yeah,
Is none of it's actually there, but it's like so like crushing mentally that most people can't handle it, and you have to
yeah,
be incredibly strong-willed to handle it. And even
mhm,
Darth Bane struggles to get through it.
Yeah. Well, now the thing is we've seen her do this, I think, at least twice in the past two books. Bane briefly struggles, like very briefly. It's enough to give Xana a breather, but
Mm,
it's very, very quick. And, because of the amount of willpower that Bane has, he breaks through the spell very, very quickly. But all Xana needed was a quick moment
mhm,
because she was trying to conjure up another spell, a much more powerful spell. And I don't know what this spell is. I don't know what they're called. I don't know what it is. In my descriptions here, I put force demons because that's kind of the idea that I get. But essentially, there's this mist thing that Xana conjures up that you can't touch. It'll burn your flesh.
mhm.
But it's very real. It's not like the fake dreams that you have in your, with whatever nightmares she puts in your head. And now it's coming at Bane to attack him.
Mm. In the book, it's described as an actual like you said, like kind of a mist, but like it's actually like a physical embodiment of the dark side itself.
Yeah. So Bane is attacking Xana, but he's unable to get to her. Well, actually, what ends up happening is he goes to make a final lethal strike on Xana, and before he can do that, the mist grabs his arm, which ends up severing it, and now he's defenseless. So, in an attempt to win, he initiates the ritual of essence transfer and goes and tries to attack Xena.
So yeah, his spirit basically leaves his body and attaches itself to Xana's body.
Completely destroying his body.
Yeah, his body is just eviscerated. Um, Now the interesting part here is the book isn't really clear.
hmm So what happens is in the book, the way it goes about saying it is um how they mention Bane, like is be able to see things through Xana's eyes. And so, it mentions how like Xana screams and he does too. Like him and Xana are all one at this point in time. And then it says, and then it was over. And then it cuts to the Huntress, to Darth Cognus's side of things, and she's like, "I felt as if Bane's spirit like leapt out." And she's like, "It sounds crazy." And she goes up to Xana and is like, "Darth Bane?" And Xana says, "Darth Bane is dead." But then
Hmm.
at the very end of the book, and this is how the book wraps up, it says Cognus could not help but notice a slight tremor in Xana's left hand. Which is a really cool way to end the book
Hmm.
because it's like, yeah, Bane's dead. Yeah, but is he?
Hmm.
You know.
So yeah, and I saw you had that on your notes as kind of like a wrap up questions kind of thing because there's
Yeah.
two big unanswered questions at the end of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
this is the first one.
yeah, that's the first one. So
And it's
I'm
interesting too because of how much they reference the tremor. Like it's a big plot point. And then at the end of the book here, Xana has the trimmer in her hand. And it's
mhm,
like, what is this? Now, this is not something that would be canon, but I had the thought. I said, think about how cool it would be. So like let's say there was a like let's say a part of Bane survives in Xana. And then
mhm,
when Xana gets overthrown, she attempts essence transfer. And then that part of Bane and that part of Xana are now into the next one, and it just keeps going on. Now, this is obviously not canon because by the time we get to Plagueis, they even make the comment how Plagueis doesn't have to be on his guard when uh Venomous dies because essence transfer has been lost to the ages. But how cool would it be if by the time we get to Palpatine, like there's just a part of all the Sith leading up to him in him because of like the essence transfer
Now,
things or whatever.
let me pitch this to you. What if the Sith Masters told their apprentices that as a way to kind of ensure that they could um
Told him what?
that essence transfer had been lost?
But I do feel like that being said, that like somewhere, like a master could tell that and then attempt essence transfer. But like, if it's power of the will, is like because Xana didn't know anything about essence transfer, but
Hmm.
she was able to beat, essentially, per what we read, presumably beat Bane in that because it's a power of the wills.
Hmm.
So even if that was the case, then the master still could have lost in the process and
Hmm.
then gone from there. Now I wonder if when they talk about how essence transfer was lost to the ages, does Xana know how to? Did Xana ever learn how to do essence transfer? The
Well,
holocron is
and
gone.
I think that's another thing too, how much of Bane ended up in Xana. Because
Yeah,
obviously, I think kind of really the main conclusion you come to when reading this is that like the Xana that came out of this was in some ways almost a blend between Bane and Xana to an
yeah,
extent.
yeah.
Um, but I don't know how much of like Bane's knowledge would have been or Xana would have been able to absorb
Absorb or
through
whatever.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's an interesting thought, and I do wonder what the intent was. What Drew Carpenter's intent with this part was, just to leave it ambiguous, or like what the intent with that was. Um, Now another unanswered question comes in the epilogue. So we left Seth Hearth after the Stone Prison. He had the holocron. We find him here, and he's studying the holocron. And his plan is to learn how to live a very, very long life.
Hmm.
And in that long life, he will have to stay away from people like Xana because they would probably try and kill him. But that's where we leave it. And he's learning from Darth and Dedu uh, to try and figure out how to uh, do the ritual of essence transfer. Now, one interesting thing I do want to bring up with this is Bane didn't mess up the holocron beforehand,
I guess not.
because I feel like it kind of made the point to make it seem as if Bane messed up the holocron. But I guess if he's using it here, I guess he didn't. But how long do you think Seth Hearth lives?
I don't know. So it's interesting. So I was just looking this up, um, to see if there were any more um, um, novels written by Drew Karpyshyn. Because
Hmm.
typically, like, if there's a character like Seth introduced in a book like this, typically another author is not going to come in and try to, finish up that storyline.
Yeah.
But the only two books that Star Wars books that Drew Karpyshyn wrote after the Bane trilogy were the two Old Republic novels, Revan and Annihilation. which
Mm,
both of those are prequels.
yeah.
Which also, reading this actually makes a lot of sense now. I did not know this, but do you know what else, what other projects Drew Karpyshyn was a writer on? A little game called Knights of the Old Republic.
Okay. You said he wrote the Revan novel too, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Have you
So
read the not Revan novel?
I have not. It's actually on my shelf over there, but I have not read it yet.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely one that
Mm,
we'll need to get to at some point because it ties in so much to the game. Um it's a sequel to the game essentially. Um
mm,
so real quick, I do want to make this read this little thing right here because this there's no time for like Seth Harth's death or anything like that, but it says while in Hearth's possession for some time, Endedu's holocron was discovered on Korriban and 21 BBY by the Sith Lord Darth Tyrannus. It is unknown how he was parted with this relic, but it could not have been due to his final death, as Hearth is known to have lived past the Clone Wars.
interesting.
So he lives for over 1,000 years.
Interesting. Yeah, we do probably should probably look into seeing what happens to this character at some point, because I'm sure there's
Because
probably
it's
something else about this character.
Well, I wonder here it says he is known to live past the Clone Wars. This is under his legacy. So this is a very, very bottom of the Wikipedia article, right? If you go up to any of the other ones, it's just talking about um the stuff that we know from the book.
Mm,
So where do we learn that he is supposedly here, let me click on this. All right, it's ultimate adversity. What is this? Interesting. I don't know. We'll have to look into this character at some point because he might be an interesting one to follow. Anyways, that's interesting that they say that he lived past the Clone Wars. I mean, essentially, I guess the thought is he could be anyone.
mm,
He might have figured out how to clone a body and go from there. But anyways.
mm. Anyway, so another little. I was just reading through the Wikipedia article, like the actual Wikipedia article for Drew
Mhm.
Karpyshyn, and so he actually has uh written for several other games too, or several other pretty big games too, the like Baldur's Gate 2 and
Mhm.
Mass Effect. Um, but an interesting thing here in one of the paragraphs here about it, like, under personal life, it talks about him being a fan of the Chargers, like NFL, San Diego Chargers,
Team. Yeah, yeah.
which now they're the LA Chargers, but still. Um, I found this kind of funny because after that it says, he believes that in the NFL, Bill Belichick is most likely to follow the ways of the Sith, while Peyton Manning is most likely to be a Jedi.
Yeah, I could see that. He's pretty right on the money with that.
Yeah, I just thought that was funny. But yeah. Anyway, do you have anything else to say about the Bane trilogy as a whole?
Uh, no. I know, and then I continue to talk. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's one of those things where this was really good. We've
Mm,
spent 3 episodes talking about it, but we've mentioned multiple times just how how great of a job Drew Carpenter did with writing these books, and like you said, like there's no badly written characters.
Mhm,
Um, every character in this
mhm,
has been really well thought out, really well, you know, planned out. I also like the fact of like how unceremoniously many of these characters die.
mhm. Well, and
Like there's no like it's a very realistic book in the fact that you know it gives no like it doesn't have a thought for what a character is or has done. If it's time for that character to die in the story, they're dead.
also, again, I appreciate the fact that he was able to write a villain story and not have the villain be relatable or redeemable.
Mhm.
Because that's one thing that I get kind of. I mean, okay, look, everyone likes a good, redeemable villain. Look at Darth Vader,
Yeah.
like iconic. But then there's also always this kind of refreshingness of having a villain like Palpatine who's just unapologetically evil, and that's
Mhm.
Darth Bane. Like you even see it with Lucia trying to think, oh, maybe he's redeemable, but no, he's not. He's evil,
Yeah.
and you get that, and but also too with that point, it's not trying to portray him. Oh, he's evil, but he's evil because of some trauma he's had, which that might be true because he grew up in a pretty crappy situation,
Yeah.
but neither Bane nor the book itself nor Drew Karpyshyn ever points to that as no as this is why he's evil. This might be
Mhm.
what led him down that path, but that's not an excuse for being evil.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
appreciate that in these books because it is really hard to write a villain story.
Yeah. And like you said, it is so well done.
Mhm,
So well done. I think we mentioned it when we were talking about the Path of Destruction. There's a point where you're sitting here in the story, and because Path of Destruction is him from being a okay character, someone you can root for, to oh, this guy's bad.
well, and
And so you're kind of going through those emotions while you're reading through the book. But there's a point where it's like where he's dying of the poisons, and to survive, he kills a family.
mhm,
And I remember making the comment about how it's like you're sitting here and you're like, "Oh yeah, let's root for this guy. Oh yeah, go kill that fat." Wait a minute, what'd you just do?
yeah,
It's like,
it's
oh wait, I'm not supposed to be
mhm,
rooting for this guy because he's a bad guy.
mhm. So it's like and that's also another good thing with Path of Destruction because it starts out like Bane and his character kind of starts out being, oh, he's in a crappy situation. It's kind of relatable. We've all had jobs we hated. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of relatable. Then he ends up killing a guy. And it's like, okay, less relatable, but okay,
Understandable how you ended up in that situation.
yeah, understandable. And then going to being with the Gloomwalkers, which okay, you're on the wrong side of the war. You're fighting for the bad guys, but still, you're actually a somewhat honorable guy right now.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mentioned multiple times how like it's completely different the Sith
yeah.
troopers compared to the Sith themselves.
Like I said, when he was fighting with the Gloomwalkers, he was honestly kind of honorable and heroic.
Yeah,
Like, there was almost that sense of nobility, and then immediately going to the Sith Academy and fully embracing the dark side. It's like,
yeah,
once you get to that point, there is no coming back.
yeah, exactly. And but yeah, it was really, really well written. I know we talked about it, and it's always great. I have not come across a Star Wars book that I've read that I've thought, man, that thing was awful. Like the story, the
Mhm,
writing, everything was. All of the ones that I've read so far have been really, really well done, and I continue to find ones that are just really well done. And we said this about the Thrawn trilogy. It was
Mhm.
executed extremely well. Bane trilogy has been really, really fun to read through.
Mhm. Now,
I will
I
go
think
back through them at some point later down the
mhm.
road because they're just good stories to read through. Um, but
I
yeah.
think with the Thrawn trilogy, that I don't know. I still think with Timothy Zahn's writing skills on that's one of the, if not probably the best Star Wars like books because he managed to take existing character. Because okay, yes, Bane was an existing character, but we didn't know anything about him.
Hmm.
But Zahn took existing characters and kept what makes those characters,
Hmm.
which Disney
him
which
when
Disney can't seem to do.
they needed him when they made the sequels.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I mean, man, this was fun to read through. I'm looking forward to all the other books that we have on our schedule because they're great reads,
Mm.
and there's so many fun stories out there with Star Wars to talk about. That's what we're here for, and yeah. So I don't have anything else, David. If you don't have anything else, we're approaching 2 hours here. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's true. But another interesting thing too, just to kind of give y'all a heads up of where we're headed. Um, I think it's probably gonna be late summer, but we actually are planning on getting into some canon novels because every, with the exception of Dark Disciple, which we read last year sometime, like earlier last year, last spring, I think.
mhm.
With the exception of Dark Disciple, everything else we have read has been Legends. We are
Yeah.
planning on getting it back into some canon stuff. Um, but honestly, I've been enjoying kind of exploring Legends a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I really enjoy all these,
yeah.
especially Old Republic, Legends books. And how well they do tie themselves into the greater Star Wars universe, despite sometimes not even being written uh until or having been written before certain events,
Mhm.
that we
Yeah.
know now in Star Wars. But
Anyway, why
yeah.
don't you go ahead and sign us off?
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment, tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and you can leave out what you didn't like. And join us next time on X-Wing Radio.
Now this is podcasting.
Why does it have a curse word thing on it? What? I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, that's
I
how
did
I
I,
feel about it.
I did that because that's your reaction almost every time.
Yeah, hey, you're definitely right about that. Alrighty, let's get out of here, David. I'm tired. Oh wait, it's not bedtime.
Yeah, unless I need to not go to bed, I need to, not go straight to bed. I just got up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Alrighty, let's sign off.
we
Pound
already
it,
did that.
nugget. See ya.
That's copyright or
I
trademarks,
don't know.
either way. Anyway,
Trademark. Trademarks.
anyway, adios.